USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com, featuring conversations with college hockey coaches and players and journalists who cover the sport.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for December 31st, 2019. Happy New Year. I'm Ed Trefzger, and joining me this week as co-host is Dan Rubin from USCHO. This broadcast is sponsored by the 2020 NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit, Michigan. For tickets, visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. Our guest has been covering North Dakota for the last 15 seasons with the Grand Forks Herald, and we're happy to have with us to talk North Dakota Fighting Hawks hockey, Brad Schlossman.
Well, Brad, first off, thanks for jumping on with Ed and me this week, especially during the semester break. It's been a fun season. North Dakota back number one in the nation. I think we can officially say it. North Dakota is back after what happened last year and missing the NCAA tournament. Agree?
Yeah, I kind of thought that they would be quite a bit better this year. I thought at the start of the season, not a lot of people know how good this team is going to be yet. And the reason for that is if you're watching last year's games, they really dominated a lot of those games that they lost. They just could not find a way to score a goal. But if you look at possession metrics, I bet they were top 3 in the nation. Shot differential, they were really good defensively, and they returned almost that whole D-core. And what that told me is, once again, they're going to spend a lot of time in the other teams into the rink just because they're so efficient at breaking out the puck and getting into the offensive zone. And I thought, you know what, if they just score a little bit, they're going to be pretty good. That being said, I did not see this coming. At no point did I ever imagine that they would have one loss heading into the new year. I thought they'd have, a couple guys who take a step like most college hockey teams do. You have your 1 or 2 guys, maybe 3. They've had like 7 or 8 guys take big steps. And that's been the big difference, is that they're just so deep. They're still defending just like they did last year. But the offense is, I thought they would have some of those nights like they had last year where they, outshoot a team by 15 and they just can't buy a goal and they lose. And they're going to have still those nights, but it's been something to watch the offense come alive, and as that's come alive, you've been able to see the confidence on the players, and I think that feeds itself.
Well, it's funny. I was looking over the stat sheet, and last year only 2 20-point guys. Jordan Kawaguchi had 26 points. He's already got 24, and we're only halfway through the year. So, needless to say, guys are definitely stepping up and taking a jump. But is it anything that they've altered on the ice? Is it just or is it just guys getting comfortable in the system this year, or a couple guys getting different types of looks, or is it something that when you look at this team, you just say, well, they're playing the system and they're just playing the system better than maybe what they did over the course of the entire last year?
Yeah, no, I think it's more that they're just they're better offensively for a few reasons. When you look to add more offense, one of the good parts for them is they didn't lose a ton. So all of a sudden you have guys coming back, and the first way you add offense is by having guys take jumps. And like I said, you have a Jasper Weatherby who had 2 goals last year, all of a sudden is playing like he did when he led the BCHL in scoring. You're like, last year, he's a 4th round draft pick, a dominant BCHL player, and you're like, oh, I just don't see it. And this year, you're like, okay, I get it. I see why he led the BCHL in scoring. You have a guy like Colin Adams, who was a point per game guy in the USHL. He had not scored a whole lot. What did he have? 3 goals last year? Maybe he had 2 that last year too. And all of a sudden, he's become the player that they always hoped he would be. He's playing with speed, confidence, dynamic, grant mismatches. So all of a sudden, you have all these guys taking jumps. Number 2, you look at the freshman class. Who are they bringing in? Well, as you're seeing with the World Juniors right now, Shane Pinto is a big-time player. He's their team's leading goal scorer right now as we head into the new year. So they added in a really good freshman class, not to mention Harrison Blaisdell and Judd Caulfield have both been very good for them. Ethan Frisch on D has been solid. And then all of a sudden, for the first time ever, UND brings in a senior graduate transfer in Weston Michaud from Colorado College. And here you have a guy who he doesn't have to go through the freshman growing pains that most college hockey players do. He's a guy who's already been a top scorer for his team in the NCHC, and he comes in ready to go. So they added the graduate transfer. They brought in some freshmen who are contributing right away, and then all these guys took steps. So I think it's kind of been the perfect storm that they've looked at every way that they could possibly improve their team, and they've really hit on all these different elements.
Yeah, the guy who I love is Pinto, especially because I think he's skating with Michaud, and they at the end of the first semester did some pretty bad things to Western Michigan in that game when they dropped the snowman on the Broncos. But in back, Adam Shield came back after last year. He was pretty good last year, I felt, and this year. He's taken another step, just in the numbers, 1.56 goals against, 927 save percent, a couple of shutouts, 14 wins, obviously is the big number, including 7 in league. He played really well at times last year, but this year, what has he given North Dakota, and what's kind of been your observation of his game in net?
Yeah, you're right. He did have a really good year last year, and I thought he was better than his numbers showed last year. You look at his numbers, you're like, yeah, that's decent, but not he was good. All of a sudden, mid-February, they're at Western Michigan, and there's a breakaway at the end of the game, and a Western guy and a UND guy collide with each other. They both lose their footing and end up just in innocent play, end up running into. Both of them run into Shield, and he gets a knee injury. He's out for the year. Actually, that night I wrote my game story and looked at the traffic metrics at the end of the season, and that game story was the second most read game story of the year because UND fans knew what Adam Shield meant to the team. And so, the fact that he was able to come back, his first game back, he gets a shutout. I think he's just continued his confidence from last year. UND in the offseason, they brought back Carl Gehring. He had been their goalie coach from, I want to say, like 2010 to 17. He left to go to the Tampa Bay Lightning organization and be a goalie coach there. Now he came back as a full-time assistant. And Carl is really well known for his work with goalies. While he was the goalie coach at UND, the volunteer during that stint, UND had 4 starting goalies, and 3 of them have dressed in the NHL. So he's done a great job working with goalies, and now he's coming back and he can fine-tune little things in Adam Shield's game, and I think he's been able to do that a little bit.
There's a little bit more time off this year than I know there was last year. Just a month of full games where they had Western Michigan, and then actually I think it's a similar amount of time off where they don't have those games or the tournament in the late portion at the end of the first half of the year. The fact that Shane Pinto is still playing in the World Juniors, but having the time off, how important is it for them to get a couple of non-conference games this year in to start the second half, knowing that the NCHC is such a competitive and tough league, just to get their legs back under them?
Well, I think it's important for them to go all out right away and not just try to get their legs back under them, considering what happened last year. Their first series after a break, they went out to Buffalo and got swept by Canisius, and that series ended up costing them the NCAA tournament. Had they swept that series, they would have been in. I went back and ran the numbers at the end of last year. So that's something that I think they need to learn from. They will be without Shane Pinto and Jacob Bernard-Docker, who's on Team Canada. And then we'll see who else is missing. They played the U.S. Under-18 team last week. And, Captain Colton Pullman, leading scorer Jordan Kawaguchi, freshman Harrison Blaisdell, all had the flu. So Bradbury actually left them in Grand Forks. And so we'll see what their lineup is. But I think it's an important series just to, for two reasons, come out and not do what happened last year, and B, try to get back to that level they were playing at the end of the first half, because they were playing at a really high level.
I'm glad you brought up that and picked up what I was putting down with the Canisius series, because as the Atlantic hockey writer and a guy from the East, North Dakota has always been the mythical giant to me. I don't get to see them all that often out here, though, with the new TV deals and stuff like that. I do, but I wasn't going to be the one that brought up the Canisius series specifically.
I mean, that was kind of like last year. I mean, I remember talking to their SID before the game, and he said, "What do you think's going to happen?" And I said, "UND is going to outshoot Canisius by a lot. I don't know if the puck's going to go in the net or not." And that's kind of the way it was last year. And it was interesting. So then that was kind of their defining series last year. And this year they came back. The first team on their schedule happened to be Canisius. And UND has had this thing over the last 10 or so years where when they wear their black jerseys, their record is just remarkable. It started the year they busted them out in like 2010-11. And so usually they only wear them a few times a year, and only like on a big must-win game is when they break them out. And they ended up breaking them out at home game one this year. And that was kind of a big statement. Like they're playing Canisius at home to open the season, but the fact that the Blacks came out for that game was they're not messing around this year. Like, it's business from game one. So I thought that was an interesting way to start the year.
More with Brad Schlossman in a moment. This podcast episode is brought to you by the 2020 NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit, Michigan. For tickets, visit ncaa.com/frozen4.
This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Every time you show up, every time you make your presence heard, whether you clap your hands or stomp your feet, lead the chant or join the chorus. However you choose to be a fan, you make the game. The NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Visit ncaa.com/frozen4 to get your tickets today.
We're talking with Brad Schlossman from the Grand Forks Herald. He's the beat writer for the North Dakota Fighting Hawks. It's funny that a disaster in Buffalo last season, then this season you have a situation with a pound of chicken wings.
Yeah. One thing I just love about college hockey, sometimes you get these stories, but for those that don't know, UND went out to Denver to play a series, and you're allowed to bring two extra skaters. So Friday night, these two guys don't play. If there's injuries, if someone plays poorly, well, you have the option of bringing two guys in. So Saturday night comes around, they know in morning skate who's not playing. It was going to be Zach Yon and Josh Rieger that night. Rieger's a junior defenseman. He hasn't played a whole lot in his career, never scored a goal. And so the team bus goes to the arena at 4:45 for a 7 p.m. game. Well, Rieger and Jan decide, hey, you know what? We're not playing. Let's just go grab dinner. They end up going to the Cherry Cricket, which happens to be my favorite place in Denver, by the way. So I'm absolutely fired up that this is the place they ended up. They go to the Cherry Cricket. They're having dinner. Rieger orders a pound of wings, finishes them off, and then his phone rings. Johnny Taconic, UND defenseman, suddenly got very ill and was vomiting in the locker room, and they realized, hey, Johnny can't play. So they where's Rieger? He must be in the arena somewhere. So they give him a call. he didn't answer the first time. The equipment guy FaceTimes him and answers it. And he says, where are you at? And he said, I'm at the Cherry Cricket. And he said, well, you're going in tonight, and warm-ups start in like 5 minutes. So he ended up getting an Uber. He got there when warm-ups were finishing. He's just throwing on gear. They're pulling gear out of the bags, throwing it on, and all of a sudden he has to play. And so it's already a great story. And then, of course, he goes out there. He's never scored in 3 years, and he scores his first career goal, and it's the game winner at Denver, who was ranked number 1 in one of the polls at the time. So just a kind of a fun story. And, talking to him, he was so great in his interview to tell the story. And said the waitress got a huge tip because he had cash from his per diem, and he slapped the cash on the table, and she said, I'll go get you changed. And he said, I don't have time, and ran out to the curb. So one of those funny stories that you get, and it worked out for UND this time. But I'm guessing they're making their guys come on the bus to the game, even if they're not playing now.
And they haven't switched from chicken parm to chicken wings for the pregame meal, I take it, either.
Well, maybe for Rieger they have. I saw the next game he was in the lineup again, and the wing place in Grand Forks is the Paris K, and I think I tweeted, I bet Rieger's on his way to the K right now for a pound of wings.
And by the way, just as a side note, I encourage you to read everything Brad writes, but after the season, your tour through the best places to eat around the NCHC is also a must read. But I'd like to get back to some stuff with North Dakota. The first time I got to encounter Brad Berry in person was at the Frozen Four in 2016. And certainly outwardly, he's a very different personality than his predecessor, Dave Hackstall. And when we've talked to Brad Berry, he's talked so much about how important it is to care for one another on the team. And I saw that right away after North Dakota wins the national championship. Before he would let anybody ask any questions at the press conference. It was a big hug for all the players on the dais. What kind of a guy is Brad Berry? Is he kind of that sort of a very personal, kind of a caring, big-hearted guy? Is that sort of his disposition?
Yeah, like I'll say two things. Number one, like Dave Hackstall's super intense on a game day, and what you see is what he is. But a lot of times away from the rink, I think people who got to know Dave were always like, wow, that's not what I expected. I heard that from a lot of people. He's a certain way, but he also is, I'm not sure. He's a very genuine guy too. I haven't covered him for what is it, 5 years now. And to the Christmas, I got a Merry Christmas text from Dave this year. So, he's just a very loyal guy, but Brad Berry for sure. And the one example would be, so they played in Detroit this weekend. UND and Minnesota are as big of rivals as you can find in sports. And we all know that Doug Woog passed away recently. He had his memorial on Sunday morning, and UND played Saturday night, and Brad rearranged his travel back to Grand Forks to make sure to be at Woog's memorial. And so he left on a super early flight. He got there Sunday night. I ended up getting to the cities, and I went to the to Mariucci, and I had 6 different people come up to me at different times and mention how much that meant to them that Brad came there and how shocked they were to see him there. And my reaction was more like, oh yeah, I mean, that doesn't really surprise me. It just didn't surprise me at all, because that's what I'm used to seeing with Brad. There's another time there was someone I knew who was a big UND supporter who was in the hospital this summer, and I went and visited him, and guess who shows up? Brad Berry showed up because he heard this supporter was in the hospital, and he went to show his support. But so that was just the latest example, was these Minnesota people that were surprised he came, and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right to me. That is kind of the way he is, and I think he's a guy that a lot of the players want to play for and win for.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the NCHC. North Dakota and Minnesota Duluth, although Duluth got off to a kind of a slow start outside of conference in particular, have kind of opened up some space in the conference. What's the overall landscape look like in the NCHC? Is it really that much up in the air right now?
UND's really built a good, strong first half, and I think Duluth is going to make a push. And UND plays Duluth in late January in Duluth. It's the only time they play this year, and that's going to be a massive series that could change the outcome of the race either way. But the one thing that's looking good for UND is outside of that series, they have already played at Denver. They have already played at Western, which are probably the two other hardest road trips in the league. And so their schedule sets up them to have a good shot at winning the league. I think Denver's going to get in the mix a little bit. Western may have buried themselves too much to get in the Penrose mix, but that is going to be a team to watch in the second half. They were pretty good in the first half, and I don't know if there's another team in the country that had the injuries they had. I remember they went out to Denver and they played without Wade Allison. Samuelson's been hurt this year on D. Cam Lee's been hurt. Josh Passolt's been hurt. Drew Warad's been hurt. Like, every key player's been hurt. Hugh McGing missed a game or two. It's crazy the injuries they've had, and they've still kept their head above water. If they get fully healthy, don't sleep on that team because they're so good offensively. The other team I've seen, St. Cloud State, they lost so much after last year, but watching their series against Princeton early in the year and watching them play this last weekend, and even against North Dakota about 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, they're improving. So that they're going to be a tough out for teams. And I don't think they're going to have enough to get back in the race, but I think that's a team that's getting better. So I guess I think North Dakota and Minnesota Duluth have the inside track right now. I don't know if Denver maybe could get back into it. Western is going to have to go on a big run, but come the NCAA tournament, I wouldn't want to play Western.
I got to agree with you on Western Michigan. I saw them in the Icebreaker tournament. I thought they were the best team in that tournament, even though Ohio State has been playing very well this season. So, healthy Broncos. Watch out. I'd agree.
Who were they missing in that one too? I don't know. I don't think Allison played. I know Cam Lee didn't play. I don't think Samuelson played. So you're taking their top 2D out and their top forward out, and you still liked them. So I mean that tells you something.
Yeah. Before we let you go, I know we're kind of getting. I don't want to be too pedantic about it because some people say the decade doesn't end for a year, but we're coming to the end of the teens, and I saw that you tweeted that you hadn't missed a North Dakota game over that time, and I know that. How difficult that is because I'm kind of in a stretch of 3 years without missing a game, and it seems like quite the marathon. But when you get to a marker like that, like the end of the teens, it's kind of a time to look back. And looking at the overall college hockey landscape, we saw the start of the Big Ten, the demise of the CCHA, and the rise to prominence of the NCHC. Just kind of your assessment of where college hockey stands now and where it needs to go as far as leagues or whatever is the most important issue that you see.
Well, I think the most important issue facing college hockey is probably finding ways to retain fan support and regain fan interest in certain places. Seeing Minnesota fans not turn out for the games, seeing Wisconsin not turn out for games, I think that's a big deal. You need to find a way to get some of these fan bases back engaged and coming out and making it a great atmosphere. I was at Kohl Center when I first started on the beat 15 years ago, and that place was unbelievable to watch a game. I mean, the fans were crazy. It was so much fun, and it's hard to go there now and see that it's not the same. And so I think in certain places the fans have remained similar. In other places, you really got to find ways to bring them back. and get people exposed to the sport that us three know what it is, and the sport that we know if you get people out a few times that they're going to fall in love with it just because of how good the product is right now. I think the players are better than ever. I think that you have just some great games, great moments, and I think it's just a really fun sport to follow. And I think that's the key right now is getting fans to come out and make sure college hockey stays at the level we know that it's capable of, despite all the changes. And the changes are probably still going to come. That's the way the world works. There's always things changing, teams coming, teams going. I think it's positive that I'd have to go back, but we're at more college hockey teams when the decade ended than when it started. So I think that's a positive. We're seeing a new community. Penn State's really embraced it. I think Arizona State's a big positive. I think Illinois' pursuit of college hockey is a big positive, and I think there are more of those to come. So hopefully some of these teams that are struggling financially can find ways to bring it out, and hopefully some of these big-time programs can bring their fans back.
Brad Schlossman, thank you for joining this. Before we let you go, we do have to remind everybody that if you're going to subscribe to a podcast that's not one of ours, we recommend the College Hockey Today podcast that Brad hosts with Nate Ewell from College Hockey Inc. I always look forward to that. I'm sure that's a lot of fun to do that too.
Oh, it's always fun to chat college hockey, right? Like we're college hockey nerds here, and it's always fun to it's always fun to chat. It's always fun to see you guys at Frozen Fours. I wish we could see you a little more often, but hopefully I'll see you guys in Detroit this year.
Well, the odds are a lot better right now than they were last year at this time. So that's Brad Schlossman from the Grand Forks Herald, covers North Dakota. Brad, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, Dan, I always love talking college hockey with Brad Schlossman, and I think for you and me, it's an honor to be included in the category of hockey nerds along with him.
Oh yeah, it's the depth that he has. I hope I have that one day with Atlantic Hockey and with the teams that I cover. The depth of knowledge and the relationships that he has, and you can see why too. He's a great guy. I love talking hockey with him. I could do it for 7 hours and 7 podcasts an hour long, and I'd be happy.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of USCHO Spotlight, sponsored by the 2020 NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit, Michigan. For tickets, visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. For Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Spotlight, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.